What's up, friends? Welcome to Web3 Academy, a place for entrepreneurs, creators, and marketers to explore and learn how to use Web3 to transform business models and create thriving communities. Enjoy this next episode. GM, welcome to Web3 Academy. It is the weekly doer spotlight. I'm Jay Bird coming at you from Whistler, Canada. As always, joined by my co-host, Kyle Reedhead. What's up, Kai?
What's going on, guys? I'm in Portugal. I've made my way to Europe finally. So I'm here and I'm ready.
ready for the podcast, ready for Europe life. I don't even know what ready you're for, but you're ready. All right. Well, today on the show, we have Lucas Campbell with us. Lucas is the senior editor at Bankless and the co-founder of Bankless DAO. He also engages with teams on tokenomics and governance through FireEye's DAO, where he's worked with industry-leading projects like Aave, Balancer, Gitcoin, Super Rare, ENS, Optimism, and more. Welcome to the show, Lucas. Great to have you here.
Thank you, guys. I'm also in Europe right now, 105-degree weather, so we're sweating, but we're gonna make it through it.
I have AC at least. Lucas does not. At the ECC conference, he does not have it. I feel for you.
That's why my tone is off right now, because I'm just in a puddle of sweat. So,
and his router is melting. So if the internet messes up, it's the weather's fault.
Well, let's start with a little bit of a personal question. It's funny, the personal question, considering we're talking so much about the heat. But Lucas, from creeping you a bit online, I see that you are a serious stud on skis. I'm looking at your Twitter right now, and I believe it's a photo of you doing a backflip on skis. Myself, living in Whistler, I'm a big snowboarder. So I just got to ask, is it true that you're the best skier in Web3?
That's a good argument, honestly. Yeah, I definitely grew up in like a deep ski background, like did it competitively my whole life. And I now live in Sun Valley, Idaho. So I'm a part-time ski bum during the winter, skiing 60 plus days a year. So definitely try and shred as hard as I can. Don't know if I'll take the title as best skier in Web3, but I think I could definitely contend for the title if there's anyone out there.
Do you know anyone else in Web3 that might be able to compete with you?
The co-founder of Dune Analytics is I'm blanking on his name right now, but he's a shredder. I've seen him.
Really nice. Yeah. Nice. Jay, can you do a backflip on your snowboard? You're living in Whistler.
No, I don't think I can compete at that level. I definitely can compete at the getting on the mountain 60 plus days a year, but I didn't make it to the professional level or semi-pro level or anything like that. I broke my wrist trying to do a 360 when I was like 13 years old, and that was the end of my trick career as a snowboarder.
Just got to keep going. Got to get back up and rip another.
That's right. Well, we'll meet up in the backcountry this year, Lucas, and make a booter and have some fun.
I'm down. Let's rip it.
All right. Well, let's start as we always do. Our favorite question to start every podcast is to understand your rabbit hole story. So take us back to the beginning of how you first fell down the crypto rabbit hole, Lucas.
Yeah, I think so I kind of always grew up with like a lot of interest in money and finance. I started trading stocks when I was like 14, 15 years old. Just like doing a lot of research through and like trading through like my dad's account and whatnot. 18th birthday, opened up a Schwab account, brokerage account, was trading with the little money that I got from graduation. And that kind of like definitely used that money to like pay my tuition and learning how to kind of invest into different asset classes. And I think just being young, I was definitely very risk on. Like, you know, if you have $1,000, $2,000, like going 8% a year is obviously not what you want to be doing and making your $80, $100 a year. You want the 5, 10Xs. And was always just super interested in money and finance, was studying economics at the University of Colorado in Boulder, and had come across crypto a few times before throughout like high school and college. And then, May 2017, April 2017, my buddy called me up, was like, yo, have you heard about this Ethereum thing? And I was like, yeah, like, you know, I played around with it a little bit, but like, you know, nothing too serious. And he goes, well, it's 5X in 3 weeks. And that alone was just like enough for me being a full degen to be like, okay, what the hell's going on here? And yeah, funny enough, I ended up like just going full down the rabbit hole, ended up losing all my money trading options like right around the time I was going down the crypto rabbit hole. And I think that was at the time was really devastating, but also a blessing in disguise because I had no money, right, to invest into crypto. And I literally just spent that whole summer going into my senior year of college, just learning about crypto and Ethereum and smart contracts and how this new technology can change the world. And I had no money to invest and just had to spend all of my time just doing research. And that's how I scratched my itch. And then, yeah, slowly started getting into it more and more. And then, yeah, come around senior year, was looking to get a job. And like, you know, I could have gone the TradFi route, gone and worked at like Fidelity or some bank or some shit, and was just not about it. And saw the opportunity for crypto and just went full down that rabbit hole. And was lucky enough that we had a blockchain club at the University of Colorado, CU Blockchain. And I met my good friend Cooper Turley, Koopa Trooper on Twitter. And yeah, we connected really well and just started our crypto careers together there. And the rest is history. It took a few years of grinding, but yeah, we ended up being in a really good position. Obviously, right now we're in a great position within the industry, and was a lot of hard work to get there. But yeah, that's kind of a little bit of the background on my crypto journey and how I got here.
Sometimes losing it all can be the best thing for you, isn't it? It's a
One
good
of the most defining things for sure.
Right? Yeah. If you can get back up, that's a promise. Some people can't, but kudos to you for being able to do that. It's interesting. You just told a story about how you lost it all. And now you're basically consulting projects with FireEye DAO on how to manage their tokenomics. So I'm interested to hear, you know, how did you get into, tell us first, like what FireEye DAO is, and then just talk about like, what got you into that? Like what led you into actually working with projects and helping them figure out their tokenomics and all this kind of stuff?
Yeah, so I think this is actually like a pretty smooth transition. This was always my interest, was like token econ, like token economics. Given my economics background, studying that, I was just super interested in that. And like during the ICO craze, me and Cooper literally started working together, working on ICOs, like really shitty ICOs that never made it out the door, but we learned a lot. And that was kind of always the goal. Obviously, during the bear market 2018, 2019, tokens kind of went to the wayside. No one cared about them. No one wanted to launch tokens anymore. So we ended up just finding our niche, writing about DeFi when it started popping up. And that's kind of where we ended up finding our niche. But in terms of FireEye, yeah, me and Cooper were working together a lot, very closely. Our New Zealand down under friends, Callum and James, were also doing the same thing without us knowing. And then yeah, Cooper and James ended up meeting at a meetup in San Francisco and started talking about this idea of like a token guild. So essentially what we were already doing, but kind of making it more in a DAO format and a more collaborative. And that kind of spawned FireEye, and that really came about probably like a year later, right around COVID, when we were all just locked away and we were just like, what the hell are we going to do with all of our time? And yeah, we came together, 4 of us, and we just connected really well. Like we would literally spend 3, 4, 5 hours a day on Zoom, just shit posting and like having fun and like talking about this stuff. And that ended up landing our first client, which was like Pillar Wallet. And then James and Callum had done a lot of work with like Aave or ETHLend before it was Aave and Synthetic. So they had some connections there. And that really helped drive us forward to landing Aave as like one of the first major clients. So we helped with like the Aavenomics and that ETHLend to Aave transition. And that kind of put us on the map as like a token econ agency within crypto. And like from there, we just kept the momentum going and helping launching other industry leading projects.
Super cool. Super interesting. Did you say Aavenomics? Is that what they call their tokenomics?
That was what it was called. Yeah, I don't know if they stuck with it, but that's what I remembered it as.
I love their navy. They have like the rave for their raves too. They're great with that.
That's happening on Thursday this week.
Is that this Thursday in Paris? Nice.
Oh, yeah,
I'm sure that'll be a good event. I should fly over. It's like, I don't know, from Lisbon, it can't be too far. It's gotta be a quick hop over. So let's start high level here. And just, I want to talk about tokens in general. Why do projects need a token? Maybe you can just give us like a high level overview of like, what is the sort of use case for these tokens? What is the purpose for them? And so why should people be thinking about this? And like, why not just, if someone wants to start a business in Web3, why not just start like a normal LLC or a normal corporation? Like, what is the reason why, you know, one, I guess these tokens interest you so much, but like, why do we need these tokens? And why is it such an unlock for business, I guess?
Yeah, I think the TLDR there is coordination and ownership. So ERC20 tokens provide like, or just any tokens, even non-fungible as well, provide a digitally native way to coordinate people over the internet. And I think that's really powerful and something that you don't see in Web2 or traditional finance with stocks and whatnot. Obviously, those are digital right now, but you don't really see the same level of communities that are created when you build it on this like permissionless network, this crypto native network. So I think at the end of the day, like tokens allow projects and protocols to coordinate efforts within their community and distribute ownership to their community in a really crypto native way. And we've obviously seen that be very powerful in different, aspects of the crypto economy so far.
Yeah, I think one of the other really interesting things about tokens versus like starting a corporation, because obviously you can give ownership through a corporation, but you got to you got to give shares to people, and like it's just so difficult to do the normal way, right? You got to go and get the government to approve you to open up an LLC, and then you got to go create a bank account, and then you got to get people to sign and get the whoever the owners are and the treasurers and blah blah blah. And it's just such a hassle. And like try to do that with people who are outside of the US or outside of whatever country you're creating it. Whereas like with a token, it literally takes you like, I don't know, 30 seconds, depending on like, if you use Coinbase or something, but it literally takes you no time. And all of a sudden, boom, you have a coordination tool, you have ownership of this community or whatever. And it can be available on public liquid markets within like seconds as well. To me, it's just like, it's an insane unlock versus the kind of analog world of business.
Yeah. And I think the big unlock here is that it's all on a universal platform. Like Amazon knows their users, their email address, all that stuff, but they don't have financial information to distribute them Amazon stock. But on Ethereum, you have an Ethereum address. That is your email address, and that is also your bank account address. So you can intertwine like using a product and ownership and value in that product into one succinct mechanism, and that is like an ERC20 token. And it's really easy. It's significantly easier to distribute value to people, to users, because everything's on the same platform. There's the universal standard for all of it.
Absolutely. So I'm going to kind of let you take the floor here on this one, because this is going to be just an open question, but I'm just curious. There's a lot of people that listen to our podcast that are looking to launch tokens. They're either launching NFT projects, they're launching DAOs, maybe they have a community and they want to launch a social token or whatever it may be. There's a bunch of use cases for this. And so I know this is kind of a difficult question, but like when someone is going to launch a token, what are the first sort of things that you need to be thinking about? Like when you start to this, maybe you can make us a framework or a sort of a step-by-step process. Like what kind of things are you thinking about when you're like, hey, we want to launch a token for X project?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. I wish we could probably do the whole podcast just on this question, but I'll try and keep it pretty short. But I think the first thing is like you have to, if you're looking to launch a token or an NFT or something, like you want to have a mission or an end goal in mind, right? You want to have like what is the goal for Uniswap? It's creating universal liquidity that anyone can trade any tokens on Ethereum or any other chain, right? Obviously to create like this universal global lending market, and like maybe something like Bankless DAO is to create a community that is empowered to create crypto products, whether it's media, education, culture products. So I think that's the first thing is what are you building around? What is that mission? What is that product? That is probably the first step, is figuring out what that is. I think after that, it's also building a community. So step 2, I would say, is like building this community, right? Who are the people, who's using the products, who wants to engage, how are they contributing, all of that stuff. So whether that's creating like a central area, like a Discord, for everyone to communicate, there's like just a central hub for the entire community to talk to each other and build around. That is a big step in like creating a community, right? DAOs and like as a whole crypto, even like more broadly, it's all about vibes, right? Like you need to have good vibes, and like community is, when you have good vibes, you build a good community. And so building a good community is definitely a big step. And like you see this all the time with token projects, like the ones without a community, without people backing and supporting their product, without those avid power users that are harassing you on like your replies, like you need those people to be there to support your product and all of that. So like building a community is probably like the hardest thing, I think, when you're looking to launch like some sort of tokenized product. But yeah, building the community is obviously a huge piece and probably the most valuable one. And like that'll take time, I think. Like it doesn't happen overnight. But you definitely need a community in order to have a successful Web3 project right now. After that, I would say the next step is probably establishing a treasury. And I think this is probably like the big unlock with Web3. So a shared treasury. So you see a lot of protocols right now with, the Uniswap treasuries worth, maybe a couple $100 million now because the token's down, or, a couple billion. So that gives the community ownership, right? So we're back to step 2. It gives community a way to control its treasury, right? And what this does is like the treasury allows you to achieve the mission, right? So like, what are you trying to do? The treasury is the capital that allows you to deploy that, and like having this shared bank account with the community that they can all decide on where to deploy that capital is really important when thinking about launching a token. I would say after that, a governance framework. So how are you actually governing that treasury and the things around it? So like whether that's protocol parameters or, social consensus constitutions, all that kind of stuff. Figuring out what the governance framework is for that product is super important. And then finally, the 5th step there is, how is that governance going to happen? Whether it's an ERC20 token or an NFT, how are you distributing ownership over that shared treasury, and how are you governing that shared treasury? With what vehicle are you governing that? So those are kind of the 5 steps. So real quick recap: you want to have a mission, you want to have a community, you want to have a shared treasury, you want to have a governance framework, and you want to have ownership, ownership framework. So those 5 things kind of loosely encompass like how to launch a token and all the boxes that you need to make sure that you have checked off.
Well done. I love frameworks. You simplified that very well. So first I want to dive into governance, and we're going to talk about a lot of your thoughts there. I also want to talk into like, how do we accrue value to these tokens so they're not going to zero like a lot of tokens do. But I love that you started with mission and community. I get so many people that are like, I just want to launch a token. I want to launch an NFT project. I want to launch a token, whatever. And you're like, for what? Like, why? Right. And it's like, you need a business, you need a mission first, you need the people that are going to help you achieve this. And then you use it to organize and like you said, create a treasury and do all those kind of things. So I just have one question, actually. When I think of examples like Bored Ape Yacht Club, they didn't have a community. They just went straight to token. I know this is an NFT, so it's a little bit different. But what are your thoughts on this? Is like, there are some projects out there that just go straight to token to start and then try to build community around that token, or try to build, value around that token. Do you think that it's kind of an anomaly, or do you think that this is also something that, we'll continue to see in this space?
Yeah, I think like the NFT approach is a little slightly different than the framework, like within that framework. Obviously, like Bored Ape doesn't have a community if they don't have NFTs. Like that is the product, that is the mission, is to create like this really cool NFT project and community and ecosystem. So I think that is like, it is a slightly different framework when you're talking about NFTs, and especially like these PFP projects. Bored Ape was definitely, I wouldn't say an anomaly, but it was definitely a really good example of how to go about it if you just want to launch an NFT first. And they were really intentional on how they did it, whether it was like building that lore, launching that first derivative, what like the dogs and all that stuff. It created a really avid community around it. And yeah, I wouldn't expect that to happen over and over again. Like I wouldn't use that framework if you were going ahead and like launching your own project. But I think generally like NFTs, kind of, you launch the NFT and you hope that the community is built around that. And if you launch a really good NFT product that's super thoughtful and authentic and legitimate, you have a good shot at building that community and that mission and all that stuff around that. So it's definitely a slightly different approach, but I think like at the end of the day, if you want it to be successful, you need all 5 of those boxes checked off that we mentioned earlier.
Right. So let's look at each 5 of those boxes. So number 1 was mission goal. Let's not dive into that one in this episode. Very interesting one, but not for this episode. Build community, also super important, and we could have an entire episode on that, but I'm going to skip that one again for this episode. The last three, so the shared treasury, governance, and ownership framework. Let's dive into each one of those 3. First, just quickly on shared treasury, I feel like this probably isn't much of an onion, but any considerations that you would advise if somebody's establishing a shared treasury?
Yeah, I think some of the big tools that is like super popular right now is just like establishing a Gnosis multisig and getting community members as like the multisig signers. Obviously that pairs really well with like governance. So like how that those multisig signers are kind of executing transactions based on the governance framework. But I would say like, yeah, in terms of like tools, if that was like the question, I would use like a Gnosis multisig as like the standard right now across pretty much every DAO right now in terms of like creating a shared treasury.
Cool. That step 3 seems like the simplest step out of this entire framework. If all these steps were that simple, this podcast would be so easy. Okay, let's talk about governance framework. Obviously a big one. So many different ways you can go with governance. I know you've participated in multiple different projects. So maybe you want to use one of the projects you've helped set up their governance as an example of the best way to create, or maybe not even, we don't even necessarily know what the best way is, but a couple of the different ways to establish a governance framework.
Yeah, I think this is a great question. And this is definitely being actively researched across the industry on what is the optimal governance framework. But I think from a high level, you want some sort of like transition from off-chain to on-chain. So I think like what this looks like is, some high level community discussions, whether that's on Discord or wherever your community is based. And then maybe that moves on to something a little bit more formal, like a form proposal, right? So maybe you guys have an official form that really fleshes out all the details, kind of builds out the spec in detail. And once that's through, maybe the community loves it, that can go maybe more on chain. So I think like the standard right now is snapshot, where you're getting token votes or involved there, right? So rather than just like a form account, you're actually getting token and Web3 votes involved. And then usually a lot of DAOs pretty much stop there, where snapshot is like this semi like kind of on-chain, off-chain mechanism. But the fourth step there would be going full on-chain. So like these fully on-chain executable governance proposals. And you see this a lot with like the compounds and the Uniswaps and whatnot, where there's a governance proposal up for vote on something like Tally. And if that proposal passes, it's all very automated. So the difference there is like when that proposal passes, the contract is executed autonomously. There's no like funny business happening. Whereas snapshot, you're still relying on some sort of like social consensus, whether that is the multi-sig signers to make the transaction or whatnot, but there's no like formal on-chain execution of the governance proposal. But generally that is kind of like how I do establish that framework, is slowly going off-chain to on-chain and more like across that spectrum over time.
And clearly one of the biggest aspects of creating successful governance is creating engagement and also creating a model that's simple enough that people can understand how to participate and why their tokens matter and how to use their tokens. So does that come into consideration when you're working with a project at FireEyes, trying to think about how to, I guess, educate the governing body and the participants, the DAO participants, in order to be able to participate in governance?
Yeah, I think onboarding people into governance systems is definitely the harder thing to do. I think probably the biggest misconception right now is that everyone in the community has like the right decision to make, when really in reality there's only a select few of individuals within the community that might have like the right ideas and should be empowered to make governance decisions. And that's obviously like super, it butt heads with the decentralization ethos and the permissionless ethos of crypto, where everyone should have a voice. But at the end of the day, that's not always the best avenue. But in terms of like actually educating your community base on like governance, I think this is a really underexplored area, and a lot of projects are working on doing that. So you saw like stuff where you were kind of like forced to do it with ENS, where like you were going through it and you were signing the Constitution and you were like leveling up on, okay, this is the community handbook on how to approach governance decisions in the future. And you were forced to do that if you wanted to claim your ENS airdrop. You had to go through and sign that constitution and read it and all that stuff. So figuring out like these optimal ways to educate these users and make sure that the community is well equipped to make the best decisions possible at all times is something that I think is being actively explored and researched and implemented just across the board right now. And I think we're getting better at it, but we're definitely nowhere near as close to where we want to be.
Yeah, I liked what you guys did with Optimism. There was like a quiz basically that you had to complete before you could claim your tokens. I thought that was really cool. One of the things that you guys experimented with ENS, I noticed, and I think with Optimism as well, was in terms of governance, was delegating. And so it kind of goes on to what you were saying is like, not everyone really knows what they should be voting on. Like for me, I don't know enough about layer twos and Optimism and its technology to like decide on where this, where the DAO and the technology of Optimism should go. It's just that's not my realm. And so instead I was able to delegate it to a friend of mine, David Mihal, who was actually on the podcast a long time ago, because I know he's one of the people that I follow to learn about this stuff. So I think the delegation aspect is really cool. But you did it in, I think with Optimism, there's a few ways. There was delegations, but then there was also like an NFT that I think is soulbound maybe. Can you just sort of talk about those different ways that you guys are iterating on governance right now?
Yeah, so actually the first people, or like the first project that really pioneered like the delegation on, obviously it's been like, we've seen it over and over, through the years in crypto, but Gitcoin was really the one that like ENS is based off of, and Optimism and even Element Finance, which is also another project we worked off. They all kind of built off this delegation framework that Gitcoin pioneered and like that whole flow. In terms of like different governance frameworks, so like Optimism is doing this soulbound NFT experience with like the Citizen House and the Token House. So for those that are not familiar, there's essentially there's two governing bodies for the Optimism Collective. One is the Citizens House, which is going to be governed by a soulbound NFT, which is going to probably launch sometime later this year, early next year. And that is leveraging these soulbound NFTs to kind of try and dial in and like focus on these one human, one vote perspective. Whereas the Token House is an ERC20 based governance system that has like different kind of governance mandates, but they're going, the very standard ERC20 token where one token is one vote. Obviously there are drawbacks here, and there's obviously drawbacks with the Citizens House, but I think like some sort of combination that Optimism is pioneering here is probably the right model, or at least the closest model that we've seen to optimal to date so far.
The soulbound NFT, this is earned, is it not? Like it's, you have to be contributing or have had to have contributed for a long time in order to get these, or how does one earn one of these soulbound NFTs?
Yeah, I think that's still being fleshed out, so I don't have the full answer, but I think TLDR, from my best understanding, is that the Optimism Foundation, or I think it's like the Optimism Foundation is going to kind of like experiment with this and select like, the first cohort of Citizen House members, and they'll be kind of the governing body over specifically the retroactive PGF, so public good funding. That's a whole different concept that maybe we can dive into, or maybe that's a little beyond the scope of this podcast. But I think to start, it's definitely going to be a selected kind of permission group of people, and that'll expand over time.
So the idea of these soulbound NFTs for governance and or the delegators is like, the problem you have typically in a DAO is like, you have, let's say there's 1,000 token holders or 2,000 token holders. One, not everyone is going to go and vote. And even if they all did, not everyone is actually knowledgeable enough or informed enough to be voting. So it's kind of like a skewed vote or a waste of vote, because most people, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is just what I've seen, is like most people are voting because they want the value or the token to accrue more value, right? They hold on to the token, not because they're working on Optimism or they're working on whatever the DAO is, but they hold the token. They want to see number go up. This is like what drives this industry almost. And so the way that they're thinking about the business strategy is probably very different than those that are actually building it and want to do other things with the protocol. So is the idea of kind of, I know Vitalik has talked about this a lot, is like the whole one token, one vote is not ideal because you could just buy your way in and start voting, right? So we're trying to figure out other ways. Is that some of the problems that you're trying to fix with all these different like iterations of I guess governance, or is there other problems that are missing as well?
No, I think that's definitely it. I think not creating a plutocracy is one avenue. And then also the second one is making sure that the best people are making the best decisions possible at all times. So I think those are the two avenues right there. You obviously don't want the rich people, the people that hold the most ERC20 tokens to have, all the say in what the protocol is doing. But you also don't want to make it so broad that the whole community has like an equal voice, right? You want to make sure that there's like a balance between that and making sure that the best is really, at the end of the day, I'm repeating myself here, but you want to make sure that the best decisions being made at all times, and finding out the model that will achieve that goal is still being experimented. But I do think it's some sort of balance between these soul-bound NFTs, decentralized identity will probably come into play at some point, and obviously like the ERC20 tokens that we're seeing already.
Are there any examples of like, if you can think of the projects you've worked on, who do you feel like has nailed governance the best, and what was it about their project that allowed them to do that?
Yeah, I think Optimism is probably being the most innovative here, because they're really the first major project to be kind of exploring the soul-bound NFT aspect. I'm not going to say that they have the best governance right now, but I think as a whole, I think governance is really hard right now, especially in the current format. There's a lot of problems. So I'm going to kind of cop out on this answer and say that no one's doing it really well. And everyone's just kind of like struggling to get through it. And I think if you talk to any major DAO operator right now, everyone's kind of on the same page where it's like, okay, this is not like working as best as it could. Obviously, it's a huge improvement and a really important start on the direction that we want to be going. But at the end of the day, I think there's just like so much room to be had with designing the optimal governance system, right? But I think we're moving in the right direction. Optimism's doing really well in that regard. I think we'll see more and more protocols like implement some sort of form of this, or like, tying in Web3 identity and making sure I think just generally we're going to see more and more protocols stray away from this one token, one vote, and more of trying to optimize for one human, one vote. So that is kind of where I expect the industry to go in the long run. But to answer your question again, I don't think anyone's doing this exceptionally well. And I think every DAO operator that's leading a DAO right now would probably agree with that.
You mentioned before this centralized versus decentralized, and sometimes, especially in the beginning, movement happens faster through centralization, and that moving to decentralization isn't necessarily I wouldn't say good thing, but necessarily it doesn't make things easier, right? It actually can, put the brakes on and cause a lot more chaos and confusion. So I'm just curious, if one of our listeners was thinking about launching a DAO or launching a token, would you have any advice to them around maybe the steps to take in the beginning to do that specific to governance? Or would you tell them to maybe hold governance power for a little bit longer until a certain point at which they feel at which there's a benchmark by when, okay, now we can allow more voting from the community because we feel like we've achieved enough engagement? Do you think about it like that?
Yeah, I think the easy or maybe hard answer here is that no, there's not one answer for every single project, right? It's all going to depend on kind of what we were talking about earlier and what the mission is, right? What is this project doing? But I think just generally, like, I'm always a fan, especially within DAOs as a whole, is start small and progress from there. Do a small experiment and progress and iterate from there, because if you try and do it at full scale right off the bat, there's going to be issues. So I think if you are interested in exploring decentralizing your product or protocol, or looking into DAO governance and all this stuff, I would start small and progress from there, and allow yourself to iterate and have time to kind of fix the holes that will pop up, because they will pop up for sure.
So number 5 is the ownership framework. I'm assuming that means is that like the distribution of the tokens, like who they're going to, and how much is in the treasury versus how much goes to the community, and so on and so forth? Or what's the ownership framework?
Yeah, I think the ownership framework at the end of the day is, I think the big question there is ERC20 versus ERC721. How do you want the community to have ownership over this. So like Bored Apes definitely did the ERC 721, and then they decided to launch an ERC 20. Some interesting aspects about that, but yeah, I think that is really the key difference right there. Is like, do you want to be an NFT project and have a governing body over that? And there's like a lot of benefits there, right, where you can sell the NFT, and you see this with nouns, right, where they're selling an NFT every day, all that money goes to a community treasury, and if you have a noun's PFP, you control, or you have a right over that treasury. And that's a really clean model, right? Because money's going into the treasury. I have ownership by owning that NFT, and it's very straightforward. The other side of that is an ERC 20, which has its own benefits, right? Like the benefit there is that you have this liquid token, this fungible token that you can incentivize a lot easier. So like nouns might have issues like incentivizing people to do stuff, even though they have this massive treasury. But at the end of the day, it's really easy for an ERC 20 token to just distribute ownership and be really quick and fast moving, and like, hey, we want to incentivize this, and we can distribute these tokens really easily to this large subset of community members. So I think that's really the difference there.
And so for projects or communities that are going to distribute a token, and let's assume we're talking ERC 20 here, which for anyone who doesn't know, ERC 20, it just means a fungible token. This is the code or whatever they call it on Ethereum. And so for anyone that is launching an ERC 20, let's say it's to start a DAO based off a community, we can think kind of the Bankless model, right? They had a huge community back in 2021 of last year. They decided, hey, we're going to launch a token to the community, and we're going to, you know, form a DAO out of it. I think they launched to like a few thousand people when they first did this launch back in, I think it was May of last year. What are the kind of things that we should be thinking about when we launch a token to, let's say, a large community, like what ENS did and Optimism, et cetera? Like in terms of just distribution, like, do you guys have any models to think about, like how much should stay in the treasury, how much should go to the community, and how much, you know, should they have over that? Like how much control, I guess you could say. Like, how do you think about distribution of these tokens?
Yeah, I think the general trend, especially when we're like designing stuff with FireEyes, is community should have the maximum amount, and the team should, and investors and insiders should have the minimum amount possible. So generally, like general framework here is do some sort of like retroactive airdrop to kind of bootstrap this initial community, allocate a large chunk, whether this is like somewhere between 40 to 60% to the community treasury, and this will be up to that existing community to govern and how they want to distribute it in the future, and then maybe do like 20 to 30% to the insiders, like the team that has helped building it, the investors if you have them. That is like the general distribution framework that I would go about, and like that's the standard that we've seen just within the industry. Obviously, there's a ton of improvements to be made. I think this is the general theme right now, is that we're still pretty early in this whole Web3 journey, and we're still learning like what the optimal models are. But yeah, I think generally as much to the community as possible and the least amount possible to the team and investors is like the general model I would go for.
Right. And okay, so we've talked a lot about sort of the governance, and that's obviously a big use case of these tokens, of course. One of the other side of it is you need value accrual, right? If your token goes to zero, no one wants to hold on to that token. You're just going to piss off your community because they lost their money. And when I think about this, though, if you're giving, 60% to your community, if they all just want to sell it because they want to make money off their airdrop, which is what we see with a lot of airdrops, most of them end up tanking for a while afterwards, because it puts a lot of sell pressure on it. So can you just walk us through what your thoughts are, or maybe your frameworks, or whatever it is when you're designing sort of a token launch? Is like, how do you keep value accrual in mind when you're trying to distribute as many tokens as possible out to the community? What are some things we should be thinking of so that we can get some buy pressure or some hold pressure on this token, so it doesn't just go to zero as soon as you launch, kind of thing?
Yeah, I think this is a good question, and probably a very contentious one. I think the first consideration, and no one wants to hear this, but it's obviously the legal part, right? If you're a US-based company, there's no way in hell you're going to launch with a token that gives you cash flow rights over the protocol. It's not going to fly. You're going to get sued by the SEC. It's not going to be fun. I'm not a lawyer. This is not investment advice, legal advice, all that stuff. But yeah, just from a legal perspective, you are definitely restricted on the value accrual part. If you're outside of the US, you probably have a little bit more flexibility. But I think generally, like, this is a hot take. I think value accrual in a token actually doesn't matter. What you want to be investing in, if you're an investor and looking to allocate capital into these projects, is what is the moat? What is the moat that they have? Uniswap doesn't have any value accrual, but guess what? They have 75% of all DEX volume. That is what I would invest in, because that you can't replace that. Aave kind of has like, staking model, but it's not directly value accrual from the money that they're making from lending. But guess what? They're the largest money market on Ethereum right now. So that is really what I'm investing in, or like what I would be looking at from a value accrual perspective, is what is the moat that you have. And that I think is the most important part, because like value accrual in a token is one governance proposal away. That's one form proposal, right? That can change in a heartbeat. And but the moat, having 75% of all DEX volume, is not a governance proposal away. That is like something that we're building a really good product, right? Or a really good community. So I think in terms of like value accrual, I think a lot of people over index on that. You can even look at like looks rare, right? Great value accrual, you get cash flow rights, you get ETH directly to your wallet, but guess what? The token's still gone down a ton because what don't they have? They don't have the moat. OpenSea still dominates in volume. So I think if you are looking to implement value accrual, the first thing you need to make sure is that you have that moat, you have that product market fit, you have that usage, because even if you have value accrual, it doesn't even matter because there's no money actually going. Outside of that, I think if you are a project looking to launch and you have protocol level revenue or on-chain revenue, and your lawyers are freaked out, you pretty much just want to direct all of that cash flow to a shared treasury. So that shared treasury that we were talking about earlier, give it to the community, diversify your treasury. You see this with like Super Rare and ENS. No, they don't have direct value accrual, but they're making a ton of money month over month. That's all going to a DAO treasury. And again, as I said earlier, that's one governance proposal away. You could distribute that value however you want in the future from one governance proposal that ends up going through, the governance framework. So that's kind of just general thoughts on like value accrual with tokens right now. And yeah, the TLDR have a product market fit, have a moat before you think about value accrual, because that can always come later.
Right. Interesting.
So then if a project, and I think a lot of projects would fit into this category of not having a moat and not having that value accrual. So does it mean that they shouldn't launch a token, or can they take the step of launching a token just for governance or just as a social token, but not give it liquidity? Do you see that as being a good starting point? Or just curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think if you're in a position where you have capital to spend time building a better product or a better community, I would do that. Like that would be my general advice. But if you're in a position where you are strapped for cash and like you need some help, like you can go about it that way. I don't think this is like a one size fits all for every project. You can obviously go ahead and launch that token if you think that that's going to be beneficial for your product or your usage or like your community and all of that. So yeah, I don't think that there's like one answer that fits all, but I would generally say if you're in a position where you can spend time heads down building a better product and trying to find that moat and trying to find that product market fit, that's going to be the better long-term avenue, right? I think you just generally want to be building for the long term, and if you're in a position to do that, you should be doing that. And yeah, I think there's definitely different approaches for different projects, and it all kind of depends on where you're at in your life cycle.
Right. To take as an example, I mean, Bankless DAO was basically launched as like a valueless token, right? In the beginning, just out to the community. And it was like, everyone just was trying to get organized and figure out what they wanted to do. There was no products at that point. And then I think at some point down the road, liquidity was provided so that the token could actually like be on public markets and find a value. But the token was almost used in the beginning before it was, before there was liquidity provided, as just like an organization tool. I feel like for everyone to kind of start building out guilds and all that kind of stuff and figure out what they wanted to create. And then they started to generate revenues after that. So I just thought that was an interesting take. And I think this is a form that a lot of communities are going to start to do, something we've been looking into as well with our community. So any advice on those that are launching just a valueless token, just to sort of get organized and structure, and then get to the point where they're going to provide liquidity and start to like manage a treasury or whatever?
Yeah, I think pulling on that thread just a little bit, Bankless DAO, right? The community, like if we're tying this back in, like the moat, right, was the Bankless community. You can't fork the Bankless community. There was great vibes. And really what we did is we launched an ERC20 token to empower them to coordinate on a much higher scale, right? The Bankless community was a passive community of individuals. They weren't doing anything outside of just like consuming Bankless content and being there. But when you gave them an ERC20 token to coordinate around, that leveled them up, that empowered them to, go ahead and build products. And now, we have all these different projects right now, Bankless Consulting, which is like becoming like one of the leading, Web3 consulting firms. We have Bankless Academy. What it does is like these tokens enable, empower communities, right, to a whole new level that's not possible in Web2. In terms of like general strategy on like providing liquidity, I think like our approach there was like, don't worry about it. The community will coordinate around it. And they did, and it took time, and it wasn't the best avenue or like the straightest path, right, to that. But yeah, the community came around to, different ways to fix that problem. And like one of the things that they did was like, again, one governance proposal, let's launch Olympus bonds. So what this did was like the community allocated like 30 million bank to an Olympus DAO bonding program, where essentially you can trade in LP tokens on Uniswap for discounted bank. And what that did was allow the community to LP, give it to the DAO, and now the DAO owns about 80% of all DEX liquidity. So that's one governance proposal away, right? So I think on the liquidity front, I think I wouldn't worry too much about it off the bat, but yeah, I think just allow your community to be empowered to take the direction, and it'll happen. If there's a problem, the community will realize that, and they'll figure out a solution to fix it.
Let's continue on the Bankless DAO road for a second here. Bankless DAO has been just super interesting to watch unfold. I think it's one of the largest, maybe it's not anymore, but for a while there last year, it was like the largest DAO. I'm curious, it's been a little over a year now that this has been around. What are like, if you were to say, what are the things that you guys would do differently? Is there anything that you could point out that you would have done differently in terms of, let's say, governance, in terms of maybe the token structure, even in terms of just like now, I know you guys are sort of reorganizing into, I think, what is it, the Bankless 2.0 model or whatever you guys are calling it. But maybe you can just talk about the lessons you've learned from Bankless DAO over the last, year and a few months.
Yeah, I think that this is a really great question. I think like one design choice that I wish we did at the beginning was ideally start on like a slightly smaller scale. Obviously the Bankless community is really big and really large, and we had like a lot of activity around it. But at the beginning, it was like the big bang, right? Like there was just so much chaos and like all of that. So I think one thing that we could have done better is like maybe be a little bit more organized and starting smaller, right? As I said earlier, like when you're doing these DAO experiments, start small and expand from there. And I think that's something that, I think would have been beneficial. But at the end of the day, we had a really bold mission, and we really wanted to empower this community. So we made the decision to launch fully and like empower the thousands and thousands of community members to get involved right off the bat. And that has its own trade-offs. Like obviously we built a really strong, vibrant community right off the bat, but at the same time, there was a lot of chaos and like organizational like hurdles that we had to get through to get to where we are today. And I don't think we've ironed all of them out. I don't think any DAO has either. But yeah, I would say starting smaller would have been a little bit more beneficial for us, and like allowing us to take the model that we envisioned and like iterate from there over time would have been probably the advice that I would give people now that I wish I took myself back in the day when we launched it.
Kai, you got any more questions about Bankless DAO? Or I'd be interested to, we were chatting briefly before we started recording today about how you're working on helping Bankless transition into more of a Web3 business. And I'm assuming that means Bankless, the media company, Bankless Inc., as opposed to Bankless DAO. What does that entail? What are you guys thinking? Where are you headed with that?
Yeah, I have to maybe like tip my toes, around some certain details, just because we're like behind closed doors on a little bit of this stuff. But I think generally here, like the cat's out of the bag, or like the thing that no one wants to talk about is that Bankless is a Web2 company talking about Web3. We are talking the talk, but we're not walking the walk. And really what the goal is right now internally is how do we actually build like Web3 native business models? Like we rely a lot on advertisements and all of that in a Substack membership model. This is all Web2, all, existing models. But obviously like we're on a really fertile, open landscape with Web3, and how can we build Web3 tradition native models into a media business, whether this looks like NFTs or creating different mechanisms for membership access beyond just like putting in your credit card. This is the stuff that we're looking to explore, whether that is like even more on the NFT front, like how can we tokenize like content, and how can we do all this stuff and build more like Web3 business models around this new infrastructure that is just has so much opportunity. And we really haven't seen that within the industry right now. I think every media company in crypto is in this position where you're a Web2 media company talking about Web3. And I think right now Bankless is looking to at least change that. And I don't know if we'll have the perfect model right off the bat, but it's something that we're thinking a lot about internally as we move forward and how we want to scale Bankless to, the next level.
Interesting. I'm excited to see that play out. I want to just compare. So you have Bankless, which is a media platform, essentially. They have podcast, newsletter, social, probably a team of like, I don't know, I don't even think it's at 20, but somewhere around there. And then you have Bankless DAO, which is like the same mission, but there's like thousands of people and it's in the form of a DAO. It's like full on native Web3 crypto style. I don't know if there's anything one to just take away on the two of those things. Like obviously a smaller team has got to be much easier to move and iterate and do things like that. And I don't know if you do anything on the operations or organization side within the DAO, but I'm just curious, the way that Bankless DAO used to do it was they had certain guilds. So they had a marketing guild. I think you mentioned like and maybe this isn't a guild, maybe it's a product of Bankless DAO, but they have like the consultancy, they have the academy. Then you have a writers guild, like so many different guilds. How do they all sort of work together in this DAO? Can you just sort of walk us through what that organization structure is like? And maybe this isn't your wheelhouse, so feel free to say, this isn't really my thing, but I'm just curious if you can kind of walk us through that a bit.
I don't know for sure. I think probably the big difference right now is really at the end of the day, like just between the HQ and DAO, like relationship. HQ is really just a participant within the broader Bankless DAO ecosystem, right? So we're building around that, and we're just participants in the Bankless DAO ecosystem. So we're our own team, and you're actually seeing the same model pop up within the DAO now a lot. So you're seeing all these other teams that are just forming around their own core working groups and going in their own direction and building around that. I think in terms of guilds, so like the general organizational structure is that guilds are effectively talent pools for the DAO. So if you're a marketing person, or you're a design person, or you're a technical developer, or if you're a writer, there's a guild, there's a talent pool for you to kind of join. And from there, you can kind of get pointed in the right direction. So some guilds actually have their own projects. So like the Writers Guild is all about like writing newsletters. You don't really need much else other talent outside of that to create these awesome newsletters. So they have like 5 or 6 newsletters right now. And if you're a writer, you can jump into the Writers Guild, join other writers, and start contributing to that. It gets a little bit more complicated when you have these bigger projects like academy and consulting, where you need like different talent, right? So that was really the core goal with guilds, is like, okay, what happens when we had this like massive project like Bankless Academy, where we need like a little technical talent and developer talent, and we need writing talent, and we need all that stuff. So those kind of culminate and pull from these different guilds. Hey, we need someone to help with marketing. Go to the marketing guild. Hey, can we get someone with marketing? You vet them, they fit in, and you kind of build projects that are adjacent to the DAO, right? So you can kind of think of guilds within Bankless DAO as like these back office kind of talent pools, or like public goods for the DAO. Whereas the projects that are built out of Bankless DAO are kind of like the end goal, right? The end goal is not to just have like a guild of developers or something doing nothing, but to actually have projects from those developers and like the other community members as well.
What's interesting about DAOs, the way I kind of see it, is like you basically have this like formation, this organizational structure where you can just build a bunch of products all at once, and you happen to have the talent all incentivized to do it with you, which like, yeah, Google does that, but it took them, 10, 20 years to get to the point where they could start building and have enough like scalability within their team to build multiple products at once. we're only like just past a year in Bankless, and they have Bankless DAO, and they have multiple products that they're all working on. And so it's like a DAO is almost like a way to sort of just like go at hyper speed in building a company, right? You don't have to wait until the first product works and then you want to start the next one. It's like you can do a bunch of them all at the same time because you have so much talent. And again, everyone within that talent is all incentivized via their, ERC20 token. Is that kind of how you would see a DAO as well in this sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think like the major unlock there is the tokenization aspect. Like I said earlier, like Bankless community was a very passive community, and they just consume content, and then you launch a token, and now they're incentivized to build really cool products that are value accretive for the broader crypto ecosystem. So yeah, I think tokens empower communities to take initiative and take it to the next level, and I think that's a really powerful unlock for the world as a whole.
For business. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, I have one last question, and then I know Jay, as we wrap up, because we do have a hard stop here, but Jay will do a speed round, just a couple fun questions for you. One of the things I've seen people talking about, specifically in our community, is like multi-token ecosystem, so multi-token DAOs. And maybe, I guess this is what we kind of already talked about with optimism, but you see it a lot with like games, like Web3 games, right? Where one token just doesn't seem to be enough. You need to have multiple so that you can make sure they all stay balanced, et cetera. Is this something that is going to make its way into sort of like the DAO ecosystems as well, where they might have more than one token, whether that's like, I don't know, for governance, or maybe it helps to with value accrual, I'm not sure. But have you seen much, or are you thinking much about like multi-token ecosystems for DAOs?
Yeah, I think we're seeing it more and more within different projects. I think within Bankless DAO, I think the multi-token model there is that we have all these projects that are, a lot of them are being successful, and they can like sub DAO out, right? So they can just create a sub DAO and be like, have their own token and be like a sub DAO to the broader Bankless DAO ecosystem. So that's the multi-token strategy that I see within Bankless DAO. Obviously, with each project, with each different sector of the crypto economy, whether it's gaming, whether it's NFTs, there's definitely a multi-token approach. And like you're seeing, I think it's like Redacted right now. Redacted Cartel is like taking a governance token and a economics rights token. So you have a token with governance rights and you have a token with economics rights. Again, I think the theme, I've said this over and over again, who knows what the right model is right now? I think everyone's experimenting and trying to, apply their best thinking to what is the optimal model for that specific project. But you're definitely seeing more multi-token, models coming about. Whether or not they'll scale and be the right model is something that I don't know the answer of. I don't know if anyone does, but we're all experimenting and we're all trying to figure this out as a whole. And I think that's what's important about it.
I love that word, experimenting. That's the belief and the mantra that we all wake up with every day right now. I feel it's just experiment, get in the sandbox, try and build something, realize that it's going to fall over, rebuild it again, learn, repeat.
And I think we definitely say like we're on the frontier. Everyone's kind of exploring and experimenting and trying to figure this out together. So I think that's what's important. And sometimes people are going to fail, some projects are going to fail, some people are going to find the success. And when the nice thing is that once you hit the right model and you find the right model, everything's open source and everyone's super collaborative. And that's what like sparked the yield farming summer and DeFi summer and all that stuff. Is that people find the right model and that sparks a fire. And once you kind of like unlock that part of the skill tree, you can progress to the next thing. And we're just getting to harder and harder problems. And I think tying into the earlier conversation, governance is like the problem right now, and we're trying to find the best ways to optimize that in the best possible way. So experimenting is what we're all doing.
Well, thanks for being on the frontier, Lucas. We admire and are inspired by you, that's for sure. Okay, I got a couple of speed round questions for you, just some fun questions to wrap up, and then we'll give you a chance to give a little bit of your show at the end too. Okay, first, what's an NFT you'll never sell?
Ooh, that's a good one. William Piecer, who's our NFT guy, gifted us all on the Bankless team cool cats like over a year and a half ago. Those have become worth a little bit much, and I think selling it would be really tough. So any NFT that's given to you as a personal gift from someone else is really hard to sell. So yeah, probably the cool cat right now, but any other gift that I've received from some of my friends. You just can't dump them. Can't dump on. You can't be just,
because then they can see that you dumped it.
Yes,
That's the problem. It's like you can't, usually in the past you could re-gift it or something like that. And nobody had to know. Favorite person to follow on Twitter?
Degen Spartan. Love the shit
quick.
posting. Yeah.
Sweet. Project, Web3, crypto, DAO, NFT, any project in the space that you're excited about, you're following closely right now?
Right now, I'm just looking forward to the resurgence of DeFi 1.0. So the Aves, the Uniswaps, the synthetics, all these projects have built like really powerful moats and really strong product market fits, and their tokens have been absolutely destroyed over the past year and a half. As Degen Spartan said, we were in an 18-month DeFi bear market. I didn't want to believe him at the time, but he was definitely right. And I think at the end of the day, all those projects, a lot of the DeFi 1.0s, the makers and all that stuff, have built these really incredible products that have scaled, and their tokens don't reflect that. So that's kind of where I'm looking at right now.
Is that investment advice?
No.
Where do you think we are at? If he said 18 months, are we at the end of that 18 months? Are we in the middle of that 18 months?
I've perpetually thought we're at the end of the 18 months. So eventually, I'll be right.
Yeah. As long as you have that conviction to keep believing.
Yeah. Something you've purchased recently for under $100 that brings you joy does not have to be crypto or Web3 related.
Oh man. That's a good one. Man, I bought some patio furniture that I got for free for my house, and that brought me a lot of joy. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Is it the patio furniture that David was trying to sell?
No, that was not for free, and that was definitely not under $100. But yeah, no, my deck that I have in Sun Valley is fucking sick, and I love to spend time on it. So having that patio furniture was definitely a big one.
Nice.
That's awesome. Okay, final question. If you had a billboard that 1 billion people would see, what message would you write on that billboard?
Go Bankless.
Nice. Love it.
So quick. You're the first person to answer that question so quickly.
That's a tough question. Well done.
Awesome. All right. Before we wrap here, Lucas, would love to give you a chance to give your shill, tell people where they can find you, where they can follow you. Let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to follow me personally, I'm on Twitter, 0x_Lucas. I have a MFer that looks a lot like DC Investors. It's my own MFer. Don't get confused. If you want to read a lot about crypto and Web3, you can sign up to the Bankless newsletter. It's way better than the Bankless podcast. I'm on the record saying that. Publish 6 days a week, and it's all free. So definitely check that out if you're looking to level up your crypto game. And then if you're interested in learning about governance and tokens and want to participate, FireEye, we actually launched this thing called Wildfire. And this is essentially our decentralization process in helping empower individuals to get involved in governance. So we're literally just YOLOing money into this fund, essentially, that will distribute money to people that are participating in governance for projects that we've helped work closely with over the years. So definitely check out Wildfire as well. There's a Discord for that. There's also a Twitter, I believe. I'm not forgetting the Twitter name, but definitely check that out if you're interested in learning about governance and getting involved with a lot of the projects.
We'll put the links to all those in the show notes so everyone can find those easily.
And if you're not signed up to the Bankless newsletter by now, give your head a shake and then go sign up, because it is definitely the best newsletter in this space.
For sure. Awesome. Lucas, thanks so much for the time. Really appreciate you taking some time out of ETH Paris and giving us a breakdown of everything that you're working on. It's inspiring, super exciting, and I think we're going to have you back on at some point in the future, because like you said, we're all just experimenting and figuring this out right now. So I'm sure 6 months from now we'll have another framework to discuss.
Absolutely. And it has gotten only hotter since we started this podcast.
I was going to say, go jump in a pool or have a shower or whatever.
I cannot find a pool for the life of me. It is 106 degrees. I have no AC. I'm in a puddle of sweat.
Well, unfortunately, this podcast isn't gonna. I was gonna suggest that we ask if anyone in Paris has a pool for you, but this podcast won't launch until next week. At which point you might be gone.
All right, thanks, Lucas.
This was awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for listening to Web3 Academy. We hope this helps you along your Web3 journey. And if it does, please share this episode and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. By the way, if you have yet to join the Discord community, you are missing out. This is where all the magic happens. This is where we learn, where we ask questions, where we network. You want to be in there. The link to join is in the description below. And finally, a quick disclaimer. Nothing in this podcast was financial advice. Crypto and Web3 can be risky. You can literally lose it all. In fact, if you invest on account of what we say, you probably will lose it all. So don't do that. In all honesty, the point of this podcast is to remove the noise of markets and price and focus on utility and implementation anyway. So you should not take any of this as financial advice. Thank you, friends, and see you in the next one.